Pat Windrow again at the Cable Easel with a program which paints from life whenever possible. And in order to do landscapes of the local scene on Long Island here, we go out with a video camera and take a shot and come back here and project it right up there, and that's the subject matter. It looks like a still photograph a good deal of the time, especially if there's no wind to make the branches move, or if dogs don't walk by, or people, or cars. But this is not a still photograph. This is a videotape of a landmark in Roslyn called the East Gate Toll House. It's a lovely little piece, and as time goes by, I'm going to tell you about it. I have a lot of information which may or may not be of interest, but let's hope that when I combine the two, the talking about the painting of it and the general production of a painting of a place, then maybe it will sustain your interest. I'm working on a smaller canvas because it's a small house. It's actually 27 feet long and 17 feet deep, which is a pretty small house considering today's size places. Even living quarters of the most modest family has a house that's larger than that. But anyway, the toll house was built around 1850. They think that that's about the time. It could have been anywhere in the span of 1850 to 1860. And it is a national landmark, as you can see on the close-up, and it's a very sweet little place with all sorts of history behind it. And the best part about the history is that it was preserved. Falling apart is what it was at one time, and now it isn't. I'm going to lay the house out first. Here is the general demarcation of where my foliage is going to run, and I'm going to put the house slightly lower than what it is in the on the monitor, because I want to show the rest of that pine tree going up. I don't like to cut the tops of pine trees off. And here is the general placement of this little house, and the need to have it architecturally correct is because this is a landmark and it is going to be recognized. You can't sort of fool around the proportions, and you have to make the proportions what they are. So here, naturally starting at the roof is the way you do the proportions, and the fact that it is almost a head-on view, with the exception of the fact that over here the angle of the roof changes dramatically and becomes a third-dimensional look about it. It's a peculiar angle, but it all makes for the interest of the composition. Here in the middle is obviously the light access to the upstairs of this building. And when toll houses were built, this one was built at a time when they had to be able to raise funds in order to keep the road, the Hempstead highway in repair. It was the same old problem way back in the 1850s. In order to keep things repaired for the use of the public, you had to make money in order to find the money. And the repairs had to be done with the funds that came from the toll house. Just a sort of a very slight figure involved. If you had a 6-month permit to run on this highway, it cost you $1.50 for 6 months. I don't know what that breaks down to on a weekly basis, but it's obviously telling you how far we've gone with our inflation. But anyway, it was to keep the toll road open, passable between New York and the city of Hempstead. Hempstead, of course, is the name of a town in England. And when the British came over here and settled, they called the towns after their own towns at home, and Hempstead was one of them. As I'm talking to you, and I hope that you're watching the drawing of this, because the drawing is vital to make this an acceptable, accurate rendering of this particular landmark. The highway to New York had to be kept open, and of course the weather on Long Island, we all know, we've just come through a rather disastrous winter, and so we know what the weather can do. And the weather would eat away at this highway, causing mud and anything else that your imagination can tell you about. And so a crew had to be out there to keep it maintained and graveled and whatever it is that road was made of. And you went through this little toll house. Now, there was, of course, a person that operated the toll house, and most of the time the toll house keeper lived there, which means that it had to be also living quarters for a human being. And that human being was there to collect the tolls and to try to live as comfortably as possible. This little itty-bitty house was more than likely for, it could have been for a man and his wife and you name it, how many children. Those large families existed in those days, and they were crammed into little tiny headquarters such as this was. I have been told that toll house cookies get their name from exactly this kind of an endeavor, that in the toll houses, the toll house keeper and his wife and the children all lived in there, and Mrs. Toll House Keeper would bake cookies, and maybe sometimes if she knew the people who were going by and paying their toll, she would, in fact, they would get a cookie. So toll house cookies have a reason for being called that, and I think it's always rather fun to kind of know that sort of thing. I'm not sure about this toll house keeper lady, but a toll house was an economic necessity at that time. And we have here, fortunately, preserved through the efforts of a large group of people, one of them being the Roslyn Preservation Corporation, and the North Hempstead Historical Society, I believe, was in on this, and tremendous amounts of people, private funds as well as grants, to be able to restore something which was literally falling apart. This building was in a state of almost total collapse when it was begun to be preserved and tried to be saved back in the 1970s. And of course, all of these things require committees and very dedicated people who have one thing in mind, and that is to get the job done. They did, and here is the result. It is being maintained today by the Roslyn Presbyterian Church that owns it. And it also is the sort of the gatekeeper's house for the cemetery, because the Roslyn Cemetery is directly adjacent to this particular building. And the fact that somebody lives there now, here's the bush that hugs the side of the building, beautifully maintained, and is this probably one of the most charming houses that you probably see anywhere. Why the developers today don't take these designs in hand and blatantly swipe these designs is beyond me. I mean, to me, they're absolutely charming and should be used again and again. However, we do see all these other structures that come up and really not particularly attractive. You could copy this one and have a successful project going. Here are the reason that I'm making this painting so small is that I find that maybe producing small paintings will give the encouragement to people that don't have to produce great, big, generous-sized canvas that uses up a tremendous amount of paint and also takes a great deal of time to do. So my little methods to my madness are evident many times in many different ways. A small painting, of course, is wonderful to live with. It can be put in little places where there is nothing and you wish something was there. And so this is a little painting for just that reason, to give encouragement to people that small paintings are just as valuable, just as useful as great big splashy showy ones. There is a porch over here that sticks out by the side, just barely suggested, and whatever it is, obviously an entrance to the building beyond the front one, and it has looks like a little bit of a Victorian or pre-Victorian detail in the support of that roof, and then of course the wonderful bushes that always manage to take care of corners. Corners are boring, and if you can put a little round bush in there, you've solved the problem of the boring corner. The foundation is obviously a stone and has been replaced many times. The sills were rotting out, the roof was rotting out, the windows were falling apart, the roof was in bad shape, and the preservationists decided that they were going to do it right. Isn't that a relief to think that they did not stick an asphalt tile roof on this building? They actually all voted at the meeting to put a genuine wood shingle roof on it, despite the fact that it is extremely inflammable, and that wooden shingle roofs are only grandfathered. I do not believe that you can, in fact, I may be wrong, but I've heard that there is a grandfather clause that says you can put up a wooden shingle roof, but you have to have, I don't know, some extraordinary permits or something. But anyway, the shingle roof is typical of the period, 1850s, the middle of the last century. We do seem to like to hang on to the remnants of that period of time, but not often enough. The business of tearing things down willy-nilly is really rather distressing. I'm not going to put any more trees in because the sky has to go in there, and the trees are going to become layered over the sky. There's a sign out front. Not particularly attractive. We can stick it in here for accuracy, but it's a sign that says Eastgate Toll House. Obviously, you'd have to have some sign indicating what this place is. And so it's here. We'll minimize it, but nevertheless, if this is a rendering of the actual place, you may as well put in what it has on it. I'm not sure that I will render that. Maybe at the last moment before I sign it, and I have a little brush with tiny bristles, I shall write Eastgate Toll House, but I don't guarantee that. Anyway, we have here a shadow from underneath this bush. Nice part of the whole thing, very important. This tree's got a nice little shadow, makes all sort of a dramatic thing, and then we have this nice expanse of lawn, not too much, and with a pattern on the lawn of dark green and pale green. All very important in the composition of a painting. Back here, the landscape sort of falls away into sort of a misty nothingness, and back here we have some sort of an indication that there is something going on back here and some more trees. So here is the layout. If you think that you can paint a picture without drawing it first, that's wrong. You have to draw it. And the business of programs saying that you can just jump right in and start applying paint to canvas, I advise against it. Because I advise against a great deal of things, and that's what makes me something of a pain. But nevertheless, here I am advising you to draw it first, and to be conscious of the fact that the drawing is like the book of a play or a musical. If you don't have a decent book, you've got no musical. If you don't have a decent drawing, you've got no picture. This is one of Long Island's cloudless skies that happens periodically, and always very nice if there's something going on in front. I like clouds to paint. Did a composition of the Jones Beach water tower just recently, and in which there were some wonderful and very seductive little white clouds with shadows under them. Here we have a cloudless sky. That's fine. They're also very nice to live with. And you if you're painting, you can't possibly make the mistake of making bad-looking clouds, because you're not going to make any at all. And that's a solving of a problem already. So here I am, putting this blue tone on, which is really nothing more than a background for everything else that's taking place. But it is the furthest part away, and because repetition is the best teacher, boring as it may be, I always go back to the same thing, that if you say it often enough, it's going to get in there, and once it's in there, it stays. I had some people visit me just recently down in Virginia. They came all the way down from here. They live in St. James. Actually, the name is Bob and Dawn Peck, and they arrived of a Saturday, and we had a good time. And the interesting thing is that they bought two paintings that I do on this show up here in Hauppauge, but they bought them from me in Virginia. We live in an electronic marvel of a time. We laughed and we took pictures of me and Dawn, and the children were beautifully behaved, and they were going on to drive, I believe, down the Skyline Drive or to go to the caverns, which I sort of direct people towards the caverns. So when you think about the far-reaching consequences of this program, I've just given you one of them, that St. James residents, come and see me in Virginia. Isn't that amazing? Anyway, here we have, oh, I got to mix some more unless I swipe some from here and make it very thin. And sometimes you can do that. So you can swipe it and, well, no, it's a bad idea. Bad idea. Let's just mix some more. Base of white. Right up here, some cerulean blue, and that's about it, because it's a very pale sky, and the cerulean blue is a color essential for what I call accurate sky color on Long Island. They don't come in the kits that you buy. You got to pick them out from the shelves yourself, and it's a pretty word, cerulean. It's sort of a musical word. And cerulean blue, ultramarine blue, and avoid Prussian blue. I've said that before. So I'm giving you the pitfalls of paint buying as well as the pluses. And someday, I'm not sure, it's a promise that I ought not to make. Well, if it's not a promise if I say I'm going to do it. It's only a promise if I promise to do it. I may someday put out some kind of selective paints which would be available to buy to avoid being sold colors that you never use, colors that are terrible and that don't belong in any kind of a paint box. And just as my quest to make sure that the public is not duped once again into buying something they don't need. So on that opinionated footnote, I'm going to take a break for just a minute and clean my knives and things. So I'll be right back. Everybody, what we actually probably had to break for was for me to get rid of that frog in my throat. But I believe that frog is gone. I think it sort of went hopping away across the floor in the studio here, and maybe it's now clear. I don't know, something is in the air. It must be rain coming or something, but I was in vocal distress for a moment. Anyway, here we are. The background has been put on. This is part one, by the way. Remember always that these programs are done in two parts. Seeing as how you don't produce anything in the space of 29 minutes, which is probably all that I have here, maybe even 28. So, part one of the Eastgate Toll House in Greenvale, which is sort of, you know, so close to Roslyn that it's, you know, it's sort of an interchangeable village arrangement here. But it's owned by the Roslyn Presbyterian Church, and it's in Greenvale, so you see what I mean by the confusion. And I'm going to start right away on the house here so that pretty much of it is going to be resolved before the end of this program. And then we can sort of work on the details on the second half. This time, because of the complexity of this, I may, between the time that this first program is done and the second one is done, I may do some details, just like Julia Child does a lot of the cooking when we're not watching, and I just may, so that I can put the details in for you over the background, because there's nothing really quite as boring as watching somebody fill in blank spaces. But so I'm applying the roof color. The roof is fortunately a real shingles, as I said to you before. No asphalt stuff here. They voted to use the authentic stuff, and over the time it has become well, a little bit shop worn, and it has lost its shingly color. They're more than likely cedar shingles, and sometimes if they get wet, which this may be slightly wet from a spring dew or something, they become quite dark. But these are in fact wooden shingles mixed here with some raw umber and I mean burnt umber, no, raw umber. Burnt umber is the one that's slightly reddish in tone. A touch of black, and a base of white, of course. So the deliberate strokes, please, in this kind of thing, in case you by any chance can get some texture in that roof. You don't want it to, it maybe look like a solid mass of a certain color, but as you see, I have not mixed a total color of it so that I can get a textury look. One of the things about oil painting is that you want to be aware of the fact that there are brush strokes and that it is textured, and that it has a quality to it that is not available in any other technique. You can't get it in pen and ink, and you can't get it in just pencil drawings, and certainly not in watercolor. So the idea of getting some texture in the oils is important. Not that you have to deliberately make it bumpy; it'll happen by itself. But what I mean is that you don't try to remove all of the textural qualities that the brush strokes make. There is something more of an angle here to this one, because this overhang is much longer than I put in the drawing, and that's because I did not make the angle of this roof sharp enough. Which I like. I'm glad to point out that if you do lay it out and there is an error, that you have it in your power and also absolutely justified to correct it and make it better. Here is we're looking at this building from underneath, and here is the eave seen from below. Even though you don't see the edge of this roof, this is the eave that is seen underneath. Also, the side of the building is in such dense shadow that I'm going to put it in, and you will probably understand that the whole side of this building is in shade, but nevertheless there. I hope that that's comprehensible, and if I'm not pleased with it, you'll be the first to know, and I'll be the first to change it. There's the shadow of the building. It may or may not work. Underneath here also, I find that there is the angle of this roof line that throws a very dark area underneath here, and the details will come in later, but I have to put the darkness underneath here to give this the angle of looking at this from below. We are definitely below the ground level. We're down here someplace. So the next thing that I need to do is to put the darkness in of the door, and hope that I want that to dry somewhat, so that when I can come back with the details later, the paint will be set. I talk about terms of setting the paint. That's been ignored a good deal of the time in other shows, whereby the texture of the paint is not attended to. Oils are maddening. They don't dry fast enough. That's why I use drying mediums. But they also tend to do nice things for you if you wait for them to set, and to be less obstinate in when you overlay the colors. Here is the shadow side of this chimney, just slightly indicated. As I say, refining these pictures happens later. The little pictures that the Pecks bought were slightly refined. One of them actually was framed. And just the demonstration of this is really what I'm after, to show you how you go about this. In the meantime, there is a product at the end, fortunately, sometimes, that is acceptable as a almost finished work. Now, before the time really bothers me, I'm going to just put in, with some sap green and a touch of the yellow green, this wonderful framing tree. It's probably a maple, or no, it's an evergreen of some sort, because it's still too early spring for it to have any leaves. So this is a maple of some sort, which is in the painter's language known as a framing device. It is giving you an edge to this picture. You know that it's foliage, but it does a nice thing. It closes it in and gives you a feeling of something happening beyond the picture, that this tree is obviously growing someplace else, but it's a framing tree. And you can call it that. Nobody will know what you're talking about, but you can call it a framing tree. And here are the stray branches that are overlaid against the sky. Something to remember, that it's important. It's a nice little detail, which will happen if you work slowly enough. If you work too fast and you slap the canvas with a brush full of green and then hope that that looks like a tree, I think you've lost the game. This way, if you deliberately put these small strokes in, you will get the sky in the background, and you'll get the small foliage in the foreground. Some of this foliage here extends probably from another tree almost to the roof line. I think that you can see that it almost touches the roof line. It's a little bit of the green, a little bit of the umber, and some little touch of yellow green. Yeah, it sort of goes back here, and it's obviously some kind of a tree that is in the process of beginning to bloom in the early spring. And its trunk is visible against the background, and here we can continue all the way down here. So the business of working in this rotation is, in my opinion, vital. Many times the sky is put on, and then somehow something misses terribly, and you don't get the sky shining through the foliage. Very important in landscape painting. And if anybody is out there working, such as little Dawn Peck may be doing, she has been listening very closely and has been taking some very good notes about this thing in her own process as trying to take up painting. This tree in the background here is slightly paler in texture, and it's not all the same. It's not all the same value as the top one, because it's in the distance. And maybe with my small, very fine brush, I can put its trunk in just slightly, just a slight suggestion of what happens with a tree in the background. It's always nice to be accurate, but also when it comes to something like this, to be interpretive. There's another sort of a nice trunk back here with a sort of a curvy, this is a nice little curvy branch back there. All these details should be in there, but they should also be somewhat mysterious. There's something to be left to the imagination. There's also a sort of bush arrangements back here that can be worked into the wet paint of the sky with a small brush, and that also gives you the illusion that there's something going on back here, rather than just this house being on the edge of a cliff with nothing but sky in the background. With my brush of my wonderful brush that I bought just the other day, and this one was $5. It's a very soft and very flexible bristles, and you can see they will make tiny fine lines as well as scumble some. And here's this pine tree in the back here that is I think it probably needs some help. This pine tree may or may not be long for this world. I'm not sure, but it doesn't look as though it's got much going for it, unless it's a larch. And I know a little bit about larches. Larches are evergreens that lose their leaves, so much for the evergreen syndrome. So this could be a larch that will suddenly burst forth and have a fairly decent growth a little bit later in the year. Not sure about that, just guessing. Anybody who wants to tell me if that's a larch, that's fine. But here is it sort of looks a little bit sick at this point, but it's there, and it's to be recorded. And I think I'm going to be running out of time. Yes, there's the signal. Does anybody know what this means? This means wind it up. And I'm about to wind it up as I speak to you with this beginning of part one of the East Gate Toll House in Greenvale, Long Island. Do hope you watch the next time so that we can resolve this little study. In the meantime, thanks for watching. Bye.